Hi, and welcome to the Genesis of Preacher. My name is Chris. Unfortunately, Sean couldn't be with us today. He is currently up at Twin Peaks Fest up in Washington. So that's a pretty valid excuse, I think. We missed the last couple of episodes, had some issues with a computer and then San Diego Comic-Con. But we're back right now for episode 6. And holy shit, what an episode it was. You know, we had so much interesting stuff that happened from this. A lot of it wasn't in the comics whatsoever. So we're going to talk about that a little bit here. So first thing, one of the things that we see is the whole thing with souls. You know, souls played a very, very big part of this episode, which is something that they never really touch on in the comics, which was kind of interesting. More importantly, the soul is, for whatever reason, located in the back of your knee. Which, I didn't know that, and I guess it kind of sucks to be Lieutenant Dan.
Well, you ain't got no legs, Lieutenant Dan.
Yes, I know that.
I guess he's kind of going to hell or something. Anyway, so the whole episode started off where you see a Korean company who's essentially going around buying percentages of souls, which is interesting. So evidently you don't have to give your entire soul, just a little bit is extractable for somehow, and evidently it's a very lucrative business for the Koreans from oh gosh, what was it, Soul Go Happy Happy or something like that. So some interesting things happened. Well, we finally saw the Saint caught up and cornered Jesse, Cassidy, and Tulip. And essentially Jesse made a bargain with the Saint of Killers that he would help him get into heaven so he could be reunited with his wife and daughter.
I can send you to heaven.
Do you know what it takes to get me to heaven? What I need.
You know, which, from his point of view, is a better bargain than what the angels were offering him, since essentially they couldn't do what he was promising. But there was a catch, obviously. Since the Saint of Killers didn't have a soul, he couldn't get into heaven. So we ended up seeing Jesse running around trying to find a soul. Not just any soul, too, which is interesting, but a compatible soul. So in this series, it almost seems like souls are essentially like a blood type. That, you know, only certain types will match with, you know, with certain people. So there was one thing that was pretty neat, that Jesse, being down there in Louisiana, he knew of some little voodoo apothecary kind of place where he goes in and attempts to purchase a soul that he could then transfer and give into the Saint. But what was really interesting was that he goes in and he's talking with the shopkeep, and the shopkeep, you know, is like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about, souls? No, we don't have anything like that. We have ointment and shit, you know. So Jesse then throws in his name, but not as Jesse Custer. He says his name is Jesse Longell.
I'm Jesse Longell.
Which is really neat, because that is his mother's last name. It's his mother's side of the family, which in the comics, if you've read the comics, he doesn't really get along very well with his mother's side of the family. His grandmother, great aunt, Marie, who in the comics was a very devout Christian woman who was very cold and very hard set in her ways, and it was her intentions in the comics for Jesse to be a preacher. Contrary to what the series shows with his father being a preacher and you know, him inheriting the church. That never happened in the books. Never happened whatsoever. So it's interesting that as soon as he name drops that his last name is Langell, that evidently the family business is something to do with dealing souls, which again entirely new to the whole mythology of Preacher. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens when we eventually catch up with the Langell family, which they've been doing tons and tons of foreshadowing all season. We've seen in the very first episode, there's a little callback to the books, where that we see in a fish tank with a little treasure chest underwater. We saw in episode, I want to say it was episode 4, Jesse sees a poster saying to come visit Angelville. Well, Angelville was the name of the plantation estate that the Langell family was from in the books. So they've been dropping a lot of heavy hints that we're going to be seeing this side of his family very, very soon. Another great thing that happened in this episode 2, which was just meta as fuck, when they were going through trying to track down all the info they could on the Saint of Killers, they were going through all these different books and audio tapes, which, for whatever reason, there's a lot of lore about the Saint of Killers. But going through all of that stuff, they actually show them reading, show actual panels from the Saint of Killers, miniseries that they released back in, oh gosh, what was it, 2000 something or other. So they actually showed some of the actual comic in the series, which is interesting. Which is even more interesting because, essentially, if the comics exist in the world of Preacher, then maybe they should just find the issue that shows them where God is, and then just go find him. But you get a pretty boring show, I guess. So, long story short, he ends up finding a compatible soul, which incidentally ended up having to be part of his own.
What about me? What about my soul?
So he gave the minimal amount possible, which I want to say was like 1% or something like that. He gave that to the Saint of Killers, so that way he could finally get up to heaven. But he knew that, heaven would never take the Saint of Killers, and he would always be destined for hell.
A cop killing, child murdering son of a bitch trying to make his way through the pearly gates. You really think there's a place for you in heaven?
But when he realized that, well, shit, now the Saint of Killers has 1% of my soul, that, shit, if I damn him to hell, then I'm going to be damning myself. So instead of doing that, he discovers that now that since the Saint actually has part of a soul, that the word of Genesis actually works on the Saint. So now he can command the Saint.
I said, get on your knees.
What did you do?
The only living man without a soul. That's why the word didn't work on you. You didn't have a soul.
Which he couldn't do before in this series. Which incidentally in the comics he could do from the get-go. Just like the Saint was any old average person, Jesse always had power over the Saint as he did with every man, woman, and child. So he ends up putting the Saint in the back of an armored car and driving him out to the swamps, which incidentally, as he's driving to the swamps, there is a sign that he drives by that said, welcome to Angelville, or something along those lines. So he drove him to a swamp that's located in that same kind of property area that his family had been in, and essentially just drives it straight into a swamp, and the last we see is the Saint of Killers pounding on the glass, screaming Preacher while it's kind of blub 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 going down into the swamp. So it's gonna be pretty interesting where this goes next. He's gonna be pretty damn pissed when he gets out, which I'm assuming is gonna be pretty soon, since It was basically dumped on the family's property, and they've been dropping so many hints that they're going to be going there with Jesse and I imagine Tulip and Cassidy in tow. Anyway, we'll be back again next week for episode 7. Hopefully my co-host Sean will be back and will regale us with some tales of some Twin Peaks weirdness that happened up north. And we'll discuss and see where the show is going and how it relates to the comics. So again, thanks for watching The Genesis of Preacher. I'm Chris, and we'll see you again next week.